Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The Federal Communications Commission is set to reverse cybersecurity rules for telecommunications providers. The commission will meet Thursday to rescind requirements that were put in place following the Salt Typhoon hacks. For more, Federal News Network's Justin Doubleday joins me now. Justin, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Terry.
So let's set the stage. What exactly are these cybersecurity rules that the FCC wants to remove?
Well, these rules were put in place in the final days of the Biden administration back in January. The FCC at that time had adopted a new ruling that did require telecom operators to secure their networks under a law called the Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act. And essentially, this was in response to the Salt Typhoon hack into telecom providers that came to light last year. It was a sweeping hack that swept up networks across the world, and it allowed Chinese government-sponsored hackers to essentially spy on government figures, on political figures, to include then-candidate Donald Trump. And so this was really a devastating hack, and the FCC adopted these rules back in January. But now, under the new Republican leadership at the FCC, they argue these rules are not an agile and collaborative approach to cybersecurity, and that the rules actually exceeded the FCC's authorities. And so they will meet on Thursday to rescind these rules, and they essentially have the Republican leadership in place to do that Thursday.
Once they pull these rules back, what fills the vacuum? Do they have a new plan to address telecom cybersecurity?
Well, the FCC is saying that now under this new leadership that they want to pursue an agile and collaborative approach to cybersecurity through federal-private partnerships. And they've also pointed to steps that the FCC has already taken to collaborate with the telecom sector on Salt Typhoon specifically, in terms of investigating those incidents, in terms of releasing public information about the threat of Salt Typhoon and steps to mitigate those vulnerabilities, and as well as steps that the telecom providers have said they've taken to better secure their networks going forward.
So the businesses are already in the business of complying with these rules. What are some of the changes that the companies have put in place themselves?
Well, they've said that they've done several things in the wake of Salt Typhoon. There was a letter that essentially the lawyers for several telecom associations sent to the FCC back in October asking them to repeal these rules. And they pointed to the fact that telecom providers have already done things like accelerated patching cycles. They've updated and reviewed access controls for critical systems. They've enhanced threat hunting activities. There are a number of steps that they list in this letter that they say the telecom providers have taken on a voluntary basis and under this ruling back in January. And they argue that the ruling should be done away with, and a proposed rule to kind of bake these cybersecurity requirements into effect in the future should also be done away with, because they've already taken these steps under a largely voluntary basis.
What about the agencies? Have they also had to take action regarding the Salt Typhoon hacks?
Well, the agencies like the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency and the FBI have been intimately involved in investigating these attacks and in terms of releasing public guidance about these hacks. They do not regulate necessarily the cybersecurity of the telecom sector writ large. The FCC actually hasn't really done that until these January rules, but that just goes to show you how devastating of an attack this Salt Typhoon hack was. Is they took this kind of unprecedented step to regulate cybersecurity much more directly with the telecom sector. But the agencies have been working with the sector under the kind of public-private partnership model that has existed for decades. And now in recent years, of course, we've seen this back and forth between deepening those partnerships and then moving to regulations in some cases because of just the kind of urgent and increasing level of cyber attacks that have hit critical infrastructure.
Is there any interest from the members of Congress to do anything legislatively to solve this problem?
Well, there's a couple things to mention there. One is that Congress has passed a law back several years ago now, the Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act. And CISA is in charge of writing those rules. They've written the rules already, but they have not finalized them, and they are supposed to do that at some point next year. So that will require critical infrastructure sectors, including telecom sectors, to report cyber attacks to the government. The other thing Congress has done recently, actually just this week, is passed a bill that would establish a joint interagency task force to specifically address China-linked cyber threats, which we've covered a lot on this program in terms of Salt Typhoon, Typhoon, and attacks on critical infrastructure emanating from Chinese-sponsored groups. So that bill passed the House on Monday. It would establish a task force led by CISA. We'll see what the Senate does with it going forward.
It seems like there's a cybersecurity attack every day, and it moves so quickly. Is this voluntary public-private partnership structure going to be enough to be responsive or proactive to the threats?
That is the million-dollar question, I think. The Biden administration, their cybersecurity strategy sought to establish minimum standards for cybersecurity across critical infrastructure. In some cases, they were able to actually get those in place in places like the transportation and rail sector. In other sectors like telecom, like healthcare, like energy, it's been a little bit more difficult to adopt those minimum cybersecurity regulations because there's just a lot of back and forth between government and industry on what's acceptable as far as a cyber regulation, what's the proper standard of care for cybersecurity. That's still an evolving conversation. It'll be interesting to see the Trump administration with its more deregulatory focus to see how they kind of thread that needle with seeing the need to establish some sort of minimum cybersecurity standards one way or another in critical infrastructure.
That's Federal News Network's Justin Doubleday. Justin, thanks for bringing us this story.
Thank you, Terry.
You can find the full story at federalnewsnetwork.com.